G'day, welcome to Realms of Power. My name's Dr Tony Rudd and I'm the host of this show. The purpose of Realms of Power is to turn your true aligned power on, or turn your tap on, as we like to say. We broke this down into 12 different realms in our very first episode, and we've had a whole lot of guests come on the show to help with their specific area that might help you turn your power on. Now, this is designed for people that might be stuck somewhere, down on their power, low on energy, or just want to live their most unbelievable, magnificent life. So my background is a chiropractor for 25 years, helping people turn their power on through alignment and optimizing of their nervous system. I've seen such phenomenal change. I've also been a life coach in the personal development field for almost 20 years, helping people physically, chemically, emotionally, spiritually, all the different realms. And it's been an honor to be able to help so many people. That's why we've done this podcast. Now, if you'd like to find out more, I have a personal website on www.tonyrudd.com.au, and we have a Facebook page for Realms of Power to access all the episodes. They're available on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, all of the different platforms as well. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Have an awesome day. See ya. G'day, welcome to Realms of Power. My name's Dr. Tony Rudd. I've got a great guest today, Dr. Richard Mitton. Richard, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tony, really good to be here.
Mate, it's an absolute honour. I've known you for a long time now, and we've had so many different interactions through our connections, whether it's through family, through chiropractic, through the horse world.
Absolutely.
And I'd love to cover off on some of those topics today, which might help the listener turn their power on in different areas. So how about we start with a bit of your backstory, Richard? What's got you to where you are now in terms of your life experience? I know you've had so many, that's a hard question. But in terms of, how you would help the listener turn their power on.
So sort of grew up in Victoria. Didn't take me long to get involved with horses. My mum was pretty horsey. So probably from about the age of 7, I started getting pretty involved there with the horses. And then probably, in the teens, it was pretty good odds there at that stage with boys as opposed to girls. So that's sort of a bit of attraction as well. But I did all right with the competition side of that, and particularly got involved with an aspect of equestrian called eventing. Eventing is where you do the dressage, cross-country and show jumping, as you already know, Tone, but our listeners may not. I sort of went on from that to automatically having many, many stacks. So along the way, I sort of used to get this chiropractor out to look at the horses to keep them optimally functioning. And in the process, he said, well, after way too many stacks, so he said, well, you better come and see me. And it's like, wow, that really changed things for me. And not just the results. For me, it was very much, geez, he's got a pretty good lifestyle. I like the look of that. He was an inspiring man. And that sort of led me to make that decision even at that stage to be a chiropractor. So I knew even going through school, where I wanted to go. And I was always pretty focused, pretty goal-driven, pretty results-driven. And that just sort of gave me that direction that said, yeah, right, that makes the path easy. That's where I'm going. So I did the chiropractic studies, during which time I was also getting fairly competitive there with the equestrian, and managed to get onto a few short lists at the time I was going through college. Missed out a number of times, and sort of that little carrot was just there sort of tempting me for more. So practiced for a few years, went overseas with horses and rode professionally for a few years and got some really great experiences, and then came back and did sort of family and business, and just felt it was a part of my life that I really needed to put some more time and attention into. So sort of stepped back from the equestrian side of things. But to me, that goal, and as much as I absolutely loved my chiropractic work, there was this little goal in the back of my head that sort of kept on driving me to say, stay involved. So, the kids were involved and partner was involved, and we all sort of did a little bit of that horsey thing. To me, when life changed a little bit further down the track and the kids became a little bit more independent and they were sort of making their way through school, it was really that opening for me that was sort of opened the door to get back into a little bit more equestrian. And as opposed to being a competitor then, I very much looked at being a TD, which is a technical delegate or chief referee, if you like, and the other part of that is a judge. So that kept me very involved with the equestrian sport, has led to many doors opening and many opportunities around the world, and it's taken me great adventures. Yeah.
So can I go back just to the equestrian for a moment? Because I know that's been such a big part of your life. And a lot of the listeners may not know, but when you talked about you got quite competitive, you're probably being a bit humble here. You got to a very high level. What was the highest level, Richard, you got to?
I was shortlisted 3 times for Australian teams, which means that I ended up being the second reserve for a number of Olympic and World Championship teams, but that didn't enable me to travel.
Yeah, so the competition at that level must have been extreme. People have resources, people have horses, there's always politics involved in different sports. What was it like being that close and at that level and then just missing out at the end?
It was really frustrating, and I don't think I was old enough or mature enough to really reach out to get the best advice from the people that probably could have supported me more. And I think the system has changed a little bit now, and it's much more supportive, but at the same time, much more professional. So, yeah, it was tough getting close. But as I said to you, I never missed that, never lost that dream of having somewhere in the back of my head that I wanted to go to the Olympics. It was a number of years later that I went there as a technical official to the Sydney Olympics and then to the Beijing Olympics. And it was then that it struck me. It was like, holy cow, I've achieved my goal.
Mm.
I never lost it, as I said, but I wasn't specific on it either. And so, we're talking about, accessing your power. One of the things that I would say about that is be very specific on your goals, because my goal was to get to the Olympics. But what I realised afterwards, I got to the Olympics, but not quite in the way that I envisaged. So just be absolutely clear on, I want to be in the top 10 in whatever sport it might be, not just get to the Olympics.
I think that's real important because, the clarity and specificity of your path does make a difference. And there might be some younger listeners out there that are competitive in a sport. What lessons would you give them if they really wanted to go to top it out? You talked about mentors, you talked about the right coaching, you talked about the right things. Having lived the experience, what could you impart your wisdom to those people?
A couple of things on that one. And whether it's a sport or whether it's a business, I would still apply the same philosophy. And one of the key things that's always kept me moving forward and aspiring to more, and in many cases achieving some of those goals, is the concept of always get back on one more time.
Mm.
We all will fall off the horse.
Yes.
We'll always fall off our goals or whatever it is that we're working on from time to time. And for me, you never lost if you got back on one more time.
Mm.
If you give up and you say, well, that's it. If you're broken, that's another thing. But if you give up and say, no, can't do it anymore, well, you've almost let go of that particular goal or dream. So for me, it was get back on the horse, give it a kick in the guts, metaphorically speaking, and kick on again. And just that determination, I suppose, that's what it needs to be.
Oh, I love that. I think, what happens if generational, there's a lot of people that have lost that competitiveness now in the way that the world moves. There's still on an elite level a lot of competitiveness, but in the general sense at school, that comparison and competitiveness. Can you speak more into that? Because I love that principle of getting back on the horse. What would you say about that comparison and competitiveness?
I agree. I think that competitiveness is something that is being dumbed down, if you like, whereby, everyone's a winner these days. Now, I'm not saying that there's not a time and a place for that, but for me, the very best that I could achieve was good enough, absolutely. But on the same token, comparing that against other people and that competitive spirit, that I wanted to win. Let's not beat around the bush. Now, not everyone has that, and that's okay. I don't think you can give someone that. I think that's bred into you. for me, that competitive spirit may have even started as the middle son of three boys,
Mm,
and you got to fight for your position there a little bit.
mm,
And for me, I personally believe, looking back on it, that I was between two difficult brothers, relatively speaking, and therefore I had to fight for my position. I had to fight to be noticed. To me, achieving was part of that being noticed. And I recognise, as much as that's been a part of my driving force all the way through, to say, yeah, I want to do well at this. I want to be recognised. I want to be achieving as much as I can for whatever reason drives everyone else. That's what drove me.
that it's a real interesting topic, because it's like a pendulum. If we just don't achieve anything and are a complete slacker and a complete on that end of the spectrum, well, that doesn't really get us anywhere. But if we're so focused and driven at the expense of ourselves and other people, that might be too far. It's finding that balance in, and we're using your example of horse riding as the example here, but like you said, it could be in business, it could be in just family dynamics with your brothers, it could be all of that stuff.
There's so many factors that go into it. I look at my two girls, and without getting too personal about both of them, one absolutely did her darndest in sport, same as I did, and the other one wasn't interested. We're all different, and I absolutely accept that. She achieved in other areas. That's cool. That just wasn't one of hers.
It is. It becomes a personal definition, doesn't it? It becomes a personal choice.
Yeah.
And I know, Richard, you've delved into personal growth as well. You've done workshops. You've tried to work on your life, and you've had some great experiences, some expansive experiences. Would you like to speak into some of the personal growth work you've done and how it's helped you create more freedom in your life?
The personal growth could be very similar to getting around a good team in my competition. Right. So it's absolutely vital. I mean, we're always going to come up against or alongside people that we don't necessarily align with, that we maybe don't get on with. That's just life. That's business. That's the way it all works. But the more you can align with good people, that whether it be coaches, mentors, brotherhood, good mates, that not only lift you, rubbing shoulders with good people will always, for me, always has inspired me to do better. Maybe it's that comparison and that competitiveness that's within me that says, geez, that's a good lifestyle, or that's an interesting fitness regime. I could do better for myself. You asked about the personal growth, getting around good people that hold you accountable to what you say you're going to do, and check on you to say, are you being authentic? Are you BSing me? And are you BSing yourself? Or, do you really mean what you're saying here now? So getting with good people that not only inspire you, but hold you to accountability, to be true to yourself, really important.
From that accountability and sticking at it, you've created in your life a level of freedom, which is one of the key principles in Realms of Power. We've talked about being really authentic, which is following those dreams and finding that tribe of people you love. The second one is doing the stuff you love doing. So if you love horse riding, go horse riding. If you love chiropractic, go to the chiropractic. If you love something, go for it. And having that accountability to follow up on doing the stuff you love doing is important. And then that leads to ultimate freedom. Because in your life, we have some chosen obligations, but then we also have to be looking for what that freedom is for us individually. Can you speak more into creating the freedom of the life you have now?
Well, we're coming back to one of the things you said there before. It sort of prompted me to think that one of the things that has been very influential on me and creating that freedom is when COVID hit and there was lots of restrictions put on us. What I noticed is that people that tended to manage well during those times, let's just say, the restaurant, was the people that were willing to adapt their path and modify what they were doing to continue in whatever way they could and just move in different directions, reset their sales. So for me, that also meant for me that at that time, I had a big reset in my life, in my sales. And as such, what I learned from that is that you have to be flexible. You have to be willing to look at the big picture and go with the wind and do what it is that you really enjoy doing. If you're grinding, if you're pushing upwind, reset your sail and do what it is that you enjoy, because that's going to be much easier sailing. That's going to take you much further and faster in the direction you want to go. For me, that freedom for me has been created by continuing to check in with what my goals are, having some clear goals, and those goals are allowed to change along the way. So that's why I talk about resetting those sails to say, well, I'm going to get there a different way, or I'm going to change my goals completely. Life throws at you some stuff that you sometimes need to change direction. For me, keeping clear on where it is that I'm going, checking in on a daily basis. Am I working on some of those things that are going to take me to those goals? Even if it's like micro goals, if you like, that's one step closer. That's one step further towards that freedom or that lifestyle that I'm looking for. Working hard at it. I've always been a good worker. And if I set my mind to something, I'll put my head down and my bum up and I'll go for it. And, that determination and hard work together with, being clear on your goals and being clear on the steps that it takes to achieve the next goal. Yeah, those for me are probably the key ingredients to setting up that lifestyle that, that allows that freedom of, whatever it is that you want to do.
And chiropractic has been a big part of your life. How long have you been a chiropractor for now, Dr. Richard?
This is my 39th year, Tony.
39th year. What a legend of the profession.
And I'm still loving it, Tony.
Yeah.
Just as I said before, do the things that you enjoy. Do the things you're passionate about. Yes, I brought equestrian back into my life as well, but I'm not ready to give up the chiropractic either. I'm probably enjoying it more than I ever have.
And how have you seen, for, again, the listeners that might not know as much about chiropractic, how have you seen chiropractic turn people's power on?
Basically, what I would say to our listeners, as I would say to a new client, is chiropractic is not about straightening the spine. Chiropractic is about aligning the nerve system so that the messages get clear from the brain to the rest of the body, and the body functions at a higher level. So therefore, the power is on when the body is working better. To me too, it's not just about, the chiropractic work that we do. To me, turning the power on or keeping the power turned on, we've got to look after ourselves. We've got to look after ourselves, physically, and certainly the adjustments help with that. But whether it be the exercise, whether it be the information, and your podcasts are a classic for that, putting good information into your head rather than some of the rubbish that is so readily accessible these days. We've got to look after ourselves, because we want this body to keep us going for a long time yet. Turn the power on, absolutely, but keep it turned on. Look after it.
And look, you got introduced almost around about the opposite way by having observed the horse getting chiropractic adjustments. And as you know, you're in the horse field for many years. Not a lot of people would really recognize that the horse needs adjustment as well. They have a rider on them. Can you talk into the horse chiropractic and what you've seen and observed about the performance of horse improving when they've got their chiropractic adjustment?
I always went into chiropractic because I wanted to go into horse chiropractic. So I thought the best way into that is to get a certificate. But I never transitioned across to the horse chiropractic. And what I realized when I came out of the course is that I wanted to keep my profession and my passion separate. So for me, that was a really conscious decision. But having looked after many a rider, I often ask them the question, how's the horse? Oh, we're getting the chiropractor out to the horse all the time. Well, I'm not surprised the way you're sitting on it. You just aligned my pelvis, Tony, and I look at some of these horse riders and think, oh my God, their horse cannot function properly with a rider sitting on like that. They get the chiropractor out to look after the horse, but oftentimes the rider is not getting looked after, and they're creating the same problems again. So it's a two-way street. We've got to look after the rider and the horse. So.
Yeah. So as you know, my daughter rides horses and she does show jumping. So there's quite an impact on the horse from that, and getting that regular alignment definitely increases the horse's performance. And it's the same principle, isn't it, Richard? It's the nervous system going through the spine, and they just perform better. And that's another magical way of turning your power on.
And for me, that link between the horse and the rider and that partnership that develops, it's a little bit like a relationship, your husband and wife relationship. It's that intimate, it's that clear and understanding. That's always been a big driver for me to be involved with the equestrian, is that connection you develop.
Yeah, cool. I want to bring up a slightly different topic, Richard, but again, it's part of, I guess, your new journey, and it's the principle of judgment. So judgment can be seen as two sides, and judgment in terms of the realms of power, I even said at the very start of this podcast, when we have the different realms of power, to give yourself a score in the different realms. So if I use physical power, for instance, I'm getting you to self-judge that you're maybe an 8 out of 10 in power, and that I'm trying not to compare you to me or you to another person, but just a self-reflection that your power is 8 out of 10, all right? And that gives you a scale, 10 out of 10 being the best, 0 being no power, you're in real trouble. And to get that score, we have to make some sort of judgment, right? So we have to pick something, a judgment or a score. Now, judgment also in, say, the school area now might be judging little Johnny, and he doesn't get a good grade and he feels bad because he didn't get a good grade. And so judgment can take people away from their power if they've perceived that judgment wrong. So judgment is needed because we need to sort of get some sort of measurement or reflection.
Sure.
But being a professional judge in the horse in arena, in elite sports, you have to judge a competition. So it's certainly your realm in the sport world there of creating some sort of assessment and a judgment. So in terms of realms of power, can you speak into the principle of judgment, how it can be perceived as good and how it can be perceived as bad?
Okay, so in the role that I serve as a judge, one of the primary roles there is that you have to rank the field. All right. So as unwanted as it might be in the school realm, we have to rank the field from highest to lowest. Now, that's not necessarily where they stay throughout the competition. They can change their ranking throughout. But for me, it's a fairly clear process. But we also get great criticism if we don't rank them sufficiently. Like if we score everyone a 6 or a 7 out of 10 for every movement, and we've got everyone's score pretty much on the same, there's no point of having a judge there. And they feel ripped off that they may have done some great movement and worked very hard to get certain aspects into that movement to be judged, and someone else has maybe completely underachieved that. We're actually criticised if we don't span them out and make that judgment and judge them accordingly to what we call a training scale. So we have a reference point, if you like, but there's many things that go into that assessment of a score for each movement. So we're required to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so some people get taken away from their power. Like you said, the example you used there, which is a brilliant one, they get all hoity-toity or they criticize you as the judge if you haven't done it right, or they feel like they've lost their power and they sort of judge the judge, if you like. Oh, what does he know?
Or as an official, I often joke that we don't always get it. I've acknowledged that we don't always get it right. And we often have discussions with riders and maybe have to adjudicate over, a score or a decision that's made. And you're not always going to please people. And it's part of the job. And I just sort of joke to say, well, there's just another target on my back. But, it's a role that has to be done. And you're not always going to be right, and you're not always going to be popular in making it.
Yeah, that's the key I'm trying to get to. So when people self-judge, they self-judge and beat themselves up, and they take themselves away from their power, maybe because they didn't go well enough in math, they didn't go well enough in the horse riding, they didn't go well enough in soccer, and they've self-judged themselves.
Yes.
That's one of the keys that takes people's power away and leads them to feel not good enough, not worthy, lost their confidence, which is why I'm circling back to that now.
Yeah.
How do you think that ties in?
Oh, I see it so often in competition, whether the show jumping phase is over poles that get knocked down. And typically, you can knock a rail down. You can be leading the field, leading the competition. You can knock a rail down, and then your penalties start to accumulate, and you've jumped from first place back to third or whatever else. The art of a good rider, and we see it in tennis, we see it in all sports. You know, you see a tennis player serve a double fault, and the good ones will turn around and serve an ace the next time. How do they do that? You know, that's an art form that you just have to have such good concentration, such good belief, and you have to be able to let that last rail go. You have to be able to let go of that last double fault, picture the next one going straight down the line, and go for it. If you hold back, if you, what I call, ride defensively, if you start to jam up and say, oh my God, I've got to try a little bit harder, then you're already on your way to the next rail down.
Yeah, that could be in golf, like you said, that could be in any sport. Most of the time, the challenge is when we want to be performing, but we get lost, we get stuck in our head.
Absolutely.
So to turn on your power, what you've noticed is, can you re-summarize that for listener? I think it was so important. Someone wants to turn their power on. They've been used to self-judging or copying criticism from a parent, a friend group or whatever, and then they've got in their head and their performance has dropped. The point of this podcast is to turn on your power. What steps as a professional judge, a professional athlete, a legendary chiropractor would you give our listeners?
I'll answer that with a story. When I was working towards one of my Olympic selections, I had a horse that continually took a rail and often would drop from that first place down to third place. And that was really hard to swallow. And I actually went to a sports psychologist at the time, at the Institute of Sport, and he made a very simple analogy that I'm sure all of our readers will understand. He said, if you're watching a movie and you don't like it, what do? He says, push the stop button, don't you? You push the stop button, then you eject, and then you put another one in that you prefer. And it's the same there with my jumping. And for your listeners as well, if you're getting a result that you're not liking, pause, reflect that you're doing this, reflect that it's in your head, and play a different movie. And for me, playing a movie of me jumping a clear round over and over, put it back in my head and say, yeah, I'm okay at this. I can do this. That was just a different movie playing.
That's so powerful. And what a great technique as well for the listener, playing the right movie. If the wrong movie is playing in your head,
stop, eject, and put the right one in.
Perfect. Brilliant. All right. So, Richard, we better start looking at wrapping up this podcast. It's been amazing. And hearing your passion, hearing how you're speaking with such enthusiasm and excitement around all of those passions you've had. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the listener today about, turning their power on, turning on their tap, getting in the zone of being their best version?
Do what you absolutely love. And if you're finding it's a grind, change your direction, be flexible enough to recognize it, have good people around you that will help to hold you accountable to that happiness, that passion, that energy that should be coming out of you all the time. You know, if you're enjoying what you're doing, it's easy to be enthusiastic and energetic. But if you're starting to get down on yourself, you may not see it. The people around you will probably see it before you. So, good people around you and be willing to change direction.
Oh, I love it. Well, mate, thanks again for your time. And thanks for that adjustment earlier in the session. I love getting adjusted. And most people should really look at that if they haven't. So once again, mate, a brilliant, brilliant episode today. Thanks for your time. It's been great having you on the show.
Look, thank you, Tony, and thank you for what you do for our listeners. I know that you're very passionate as well about helping people improve their life and turn their power on. And I've heard some of your podcasts before, and you're doing a great job with that. So keep up the great work. Thank you.
Mate, I really appreciate it. And for the listeners, again, for tuning in, thanks again. Have an awesome day. See ya.
Wow. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Realms of Power. I have such gratitude for your time and energy and the vision to join us with turning your true aligned power on. To take your power up another level, you could share this episode with someone who you think would benefit, or make a comment online that would help us get this information out there. We'd really appreciate your love and support. Hope you have an awesome day. See ya.